Can you beat castle crashes using only the bow and arrow? Well, that was a question I asked myself a very long time ago, and since then, I've become a lot better at the game as I've done more challenge runs. So I thought I'd go back to where it all started and find out if you can beat castle crashes using only the bow and arrow on insane mode. Now going into this challenge, I originally planned to do it without any defense, which as you'll see, didn't really last that long. Keep shooting, I believe. Okay, now it. But since I was level 19, I was able to choose the best agility weapon in the game, that being the cardboard tube, which gives us a massive +6 agility. If you didn't know, agility is the stat directly responsible for the damage as well as the fire rate of our arrows. So to go along with this weapon, I chose Meowbert, who will give us a further +4 agility boost. So with our weapon and animal orb, I stepped into what will be the first level of this run. Now, as expected, Home Castle wasn't too bad. In fact, I was able to just stand still and shoot my arrows in a straight line, only needing to worry about when enemies got behind me. But apart from that, these barbarians were not a problem, even for insane mode. So insane mode will give most enemies in the game ×10 health and damage, which as you can imagine can lead to some serious wacky moments. Like, look at this guy, who needs 50,000 health? Anyway, we then moved on to Barbarian War, where we found some Grey Knights not doing the challenge run. But hey, I get it, not everyone wants to do some stupid challenge. Loser. But up ahead, I was reminded why defense was so important for insane mode. I'll stream for an hour and see how I feel. Ooh. And after that scare, we made it onto the first boss of the run. So to no one's surprise, the War Machine's a pushover. The only thing we had to worry about was the War Machine ramming us or the barbarians tanking our shots. And apparently the War Machine backing into us? Huh? And after waking some barbarians up in the most disrespectful way possible, I swiftly moved on to the second boss of the run. And you know what they always say, it takes one to know one. And after spending a day as the barbarian boss himself, I knew this guy's every single attack. So I simply just kept my distance and spammed my arrows. But there were two problems. One being the barbarians jumping in front and tanking my shots, similar to the War Machine. But the second is the barbarian boss's speed. That's because in insane mode, some bosses will have unique abilities. And for the barbarian boss, he speeds up after every attack, meaning it was actually quite difficult to make the space I needed. But it always ends the same, at least for now. So after defeating the barbarian boss, I kind of forgot to save the princess. Mainly because there were some bigger concerns than the princess. Whose kid is this?
Hello?
Like, has anyone ever noticed? There's just a whole child here. Next was Thieves Forest, where my zero defense was really showing. And after a few deaths, I made it to Troll Mother where this happened. Keep shooting, I believe. Okay, now it. Yeah, so I didn't really feel like dying after making a single mistake. But on my next attempt, things were looking a lot better. I managed to do about a quarter of Troll Mother's health before I even had to worry about surviving. So normally for Troll Mother, I tend to just juggle the enemies. This keeps me safe as well as doing constant damage to the enemies and the boss. But with bow only, I was forced to stay on the ground, making it easier to get swarmed. On top of that, my arrows do not penetrate enemies, meaning every troll that stood in front of the Troll Mother was one less arrow hitting the boss, making both survivability as well as damage a big problem. So after dying, I went and changed my cardboard tube for the skull mace, decreasing my agility for 1 in trade for 3 defense. I also changed Meowbert for Rami. My plan here was to use the extra defense from the skull mace to help me survive, and Rami was hopefully going to knock the trolls out of the way, making it easier to hit the Troll Mother as well as prevent the trolls from swarming me. So after fighting my way through the Thieves Forest, I made it back to the Troll Mother, where things couldn't have gone better. With the combo of Rami as well as my arrows, the trolls were finding it really hard to even get near me. And when the trolls did get close to me, I simply just ran to the other side, as Rami knocked over any trolls he touched. Now there were a few close calls, but Rami is an absolute saviour. And after 8 stressful minutes, the troll mother was finally defeated. Next was the old mill chase, which me and Rami quickly ran through. But before continuing the river section, I actually went and changed Rami for Meowbert, simply due to the fact that we didn't really need to use Rami at this moment. But for now, we were on the river section where we actually solved a pretty big problem. So there are these bats which will latch onto your head, and the game tells you to swing your weapon to get them off. The problem is, in my past challenge runs, I've not been able to do anything about these bats since I'm not allowed to swing my sword. But we actually found out that you can just press any button you like. It doesn't have to be the melee one. So we simply just spammed a magic key, and it worked. Would have liked that information a few months ago, but yeah, it's okay. Next was the catfish boss fight, which introduces damage phases. Yeah, so 90% of this boss is just you holding up your shield, with a few seconds of damage. So there was quite a bit of waiting around, which led to some interesting discussions with my stream.
I always like drink water or coffee in the morning. I just like milk's one of them where, I don't know, I'll be walking past the fridge and I'll see a jug of milk in the fridge and, you know, you just gotta be in the mood for that milk.
Next was the bear boss fight, who is normally the easiest boss in any of these runs. But weirdly enough, the bear can't actually get knocked over by my arrows. And when you combine that with Rami, other bears, and even the tornado, this fight actually took a good few minutes. But it doesn't mean this fight was hard. Up ahead, I let my chat decide the fate of this bear.
66% say you do live. Although, I am going to shoot an arrow at you. There you go. 2 arrows. There we go. You will forever remember me now.
Freddy Fazbear.
So everyone hates the cave slimes, mainly because they avoid all of your attacks. But with a range build, these guys are honestly pretty easy. And shortly after, we go against my favourite boss of the whole game, PP Strello. Now PP here is my favourite boss simply because you can break him really easily. Just by simply standing to his side, PP will just do nothing. And what makes this even better is that you can hit PP and he won't hit you back, just as long as you do it nice and slow. So I just sat here for about 5 minutes slowly hitting PP, but that's when disaster struck.
I'm sorry, PP. No, no. Oh. Oh, PP, don't do this to me. PP, don't do this to me. PP, don't do this to me.
Yeah, so I got a bit too comfortable and was reading my chat. And whilst I was distracted, I accidentally hit PP a little too fast. And if you didn't know, PP Strello on Insane Mode does 999 damage. So I re-killed the cave slimes and did another 5-minute PP Strello fight. Next was Flowery Fields, so I made sure to restock my healing potions, as this area could pose a problem. So despite the name, the Flowery Fields part of this level isn't the problem, it's actually the coneheads. So for this area, we are limited to a straight line, meaning we have no space to strafe or dodge. This isn't ideal for our current build, since our arrows can only damage one enemy at a time. And speaking of coneheads, what do coneheads love to do?
Throw bombs.
So on this level, I'm limited to damaging one enemy at a time, with no space to dodge, whilst getting a constant barrage of bombs. So to no one's surprise, I did die here. My second attempt didn't really go any better. I was still taking bombs and doing minimal damage. But this time, I brought Rami with me, who definitely helped keep the enemies away. This resulted in me beating the first and second wave of coneheads. But unfortunately for me, there is a third wave that just so happens to contain a beefy. This meant that Rami couldn't really help me here, resulting in another death. At this point, I decided to just go for a max agility build, so I grabbed Meowbert again as well as the cardboard tube. This right here is the max agility you can have in all of the game. and surprisingly, it worked. I think the improved damage and fire rate was better than having defense since I could keep the coneheads away, or maybe it was just dumb luck. Anyway, I was just happy to be past this part, but what I wasn't happy about was more coneheads. But at least I had room to move. Next was the groom, who can be knocked over by my arrows, which meant keeping him at a safe distance was very manageable. At least, that's what I originally thought. But as long as I can catch him with that first arrow, this fight isn't too bad. Now, as you lower the groom's health, the bombs from his organ will get faster and more intense. But with max agility, this wasn't really an issue. But alongside his bomb increase, the groom will also start throwing out dark magic. But as long as I knock him over, this was also not an issue. And surprisingly, the groom was defeated on my first try. Next was the parade chase, and to no one's surprise, this boss was extremely easy. So the giant troll only has one attack, that being a laser beam from its eyes. But if you do any source of damage to the troll, it will completely cancel out his attack. So the only things I had to worry about were the thieves jumping me, especially since they decided to cheat.
Ooh. Okay, why can't I hit you? Dude, you... Why? Okay.
Next we found ourselves in another cave that contained cave slimes, thieves, and coneheads, which was just a great time. I first tried Cyclops Cave, ran through Cyclops Gate, and eventually made my way through Cyclops Fortress. Now found here is a unique conehead, who cannot be knocked over by my arrows. So I simply just ran side to side, doing whatever damage I could. This led me on to our next boss, which if you couldn't guess from the 3 name levels, is the Cyclops, who was very easy even with a ranged build. That's because the Cyclops only has 2 different attacks that are very predictable and easy to dodge. So it didn't take long until the Cyclops was defeated. Now the game wanted me to save the princess, but do I look like a good guy to you? I'm sure the knights will come and save her.
Freddy Fazbear.
Next is Lava World, where we're going to be going against a lot of fire demons. These guys are honestly not too bad, since the only attack we have to worry about is their fireball. But what does suck is their very large health pool, meaning it was taking a lot of time to clear each stage. But up ahead, we did run into an area that has caused many problems in previous runs. These skeletons are extremely fast and love to try and swarm me, but luckily they don't have as much health as the fire demons, and they're a light juggle, meaning they get knocked back. So with a lot of arrow spam and a little bit of good luck, we were able to beat this area on our first try. And after many more waves of fire demons, we came across everyone's favourite gimmick boss. So the volcano can only be damaged whilst in beefy mode, meaning we cannot use our arrows. But what's interesting is if you look in the very background of this boss fight, you can actually see a super cool Easter egg that the behemoth added. Just right there, if you just look a little bit harder, just right, oh hey, the volcano's dead. Moving on. So the real boss of Lava World is the dragon, who we had many problems with during the normal mode of this challenge. The dragon's hitbox is quite strange when it comes to arrows, and the only way to reach it is to stand on this slope. Well, during the normal mode of this run, we didn't have a lot of agility, meaning our fire rate was slow and our arrows dropped a lot sooner. But this time, since we had a lot of agility, we were able to reach this spot a lot easier. So after an easy first try, the second relic was finally collected. Next was Industrial Castle, where I was only worried about one thing. And no, it actually wasn't the brute this time. Instead, I was really worried about the elevator, since we have very limited space and a lot of enemies. And I was right to worry, since we were using a lot of our healing potions just for this one section. But I actually found that by running corner to corner, I could kinda manipulate the enemy AI to not swarm me. Kind of. But what also made this strat effective is the fact that the enemies will throw bombs, and there was a pretty good chance that these would hit the other fences. And these bombs were no joke. Like, we're talking 350 damage per bomb. So after a lot of running around and a few health potions, we did make it past the elevator on our first try. After the elevator, we come across our first brute, who is basically the beefy of all beefies. But this time, I actually wasn't worried, since bows are really effective at taking down any beefies. So I simply just spammed my arrows and the beefy died. I'm sure the beefy won't try and get his revenge later on.
Don't you I hate you so much, brutes. Oh.
So the industrial machine is the final boss of the industrial castle. For this fight, there is 7 different moving parts that we need to destroy. Now normally this boss fight can be quite annoying to fight using melee, since we cannot step on these red fire grates. But since we had a ranged build, we were able to easily defeat all parts of the industrial machine. And towards the end of the boss fight, we somehow managed to break it.
Did I break the fight? Yeah. Okay, I think I broke the fight.
After destroying the industrial machine, we killed the prince and got the 3rd and final relic. With all 3 relics collected, we are able to progress to the second half of the game. But first, we need to survive the boat ride there, which was actually harder than I thought. Similar to the elevator in Industrial Castle, we are very limited on our space. Combine that with a whole bunch of ninjas that don't stop moving, and we've got a recipe for disaster. So after taking a death, I went and restocked my healing potions, which turned out to be extremely important since I somehow managed to use all 5 of them on my second attempt. But with a lot of arrow spam and a little bit of luck, I was able to defeat all the ninjas and move on to the desert. Now this is the second Insane Mode challenge run I've ever done on this channel, and if you've seen the first one, then you'll know I hate the desert. But to my surprise, the desert was actually really easy. I think being able to do damage without going near any of the enemies was the game changer, meaning I didn't have to worry about things such as the annoying scarab behaviours. You know, the one where they decide to just not jump and hit you for no reason? So to everyone's surprise, we were able to make it to the UFO boss fight on our first try. Now the UFO boss fights are the first time that we have to fight an enemy in the air, which makes our bow go from this to this. So for the UFO boss fights, my DPS was greatly reduced. So what I ended up doing was jumping and shooting my arrow to hit the UFO. Then when I landed, I shot a couple extra arrows just to take care of the aliens that spawned. Rinse and repeat for 2 boss fights and we moved on to the next area. So next is the UFO, which looks scary but is actually really easy. Yeah, so despite there being many aliens, they are all actually one-shot, even on Insane Mode. We freed the alien prisoner, took out the last few survivors, and eventually ejected from the ship. Here we landed back in the desert, to which I quickly stole this guy's camel, but I ended up not needing it, since I'm literally faster than them. This brought us to the sandcastle interior, where we have to fight 2 beefies at the same time. But since we already know that the bow is effective, I was able to just run from side to side, shooting my bow. This kept the beefies at a safe distance, allowing me to slowly dwindle down their health. Next was Sandcastle Exterior, where there were many Saracens who just loved to become Beyblades. This made hitting the enemies a lot harder and caused me to take quite a bit of damage. So by the time I got to the final wave, I had no healing potions and was pretty much dead. So for whatever reason, the enemies here love to use their magic. So on my second death, I went and changed my animal orb for Rami, in the hopes that he'll knock the enemies out of their magic. And it seemed to work, since I actually got to the last wave with 3 healing potions. The only thing I had to worry about now was this annoying invisible wall, which would block my projectiles. But with a lot of moving around and a little bit of help from Rami, I was able to beat the last wave and make it onto the volleyball game. So for the volleyball, our arrows couldn't actually hit it. So instead, I used my arrow rain magic, which was able to move the volleyball. But it wasn't easy. So after a humiliating defeat, I locked in and won my second game. This rewarded me with the map, allowing me to move on to the next part of the game, which just so happens to be the marsh. Now the marsh is honestly such an underrated level in terms of difficulty. I mean, the level literally begins with enemies that do the most melee damage in the entire game. Not only that, but Marsh is also a long level, with a skeleton wave that has 4 beefies and even a troll mother boss fight. So yeah, Marsh is pretty harsh. But speaking of the skeleton beefies, I actually decided to keep Rami for this, since if we've learned anything in this run, it's that Ram is the absolute goat at dealing with groups of enemies. So unsurprisingly, on our first attempt, we actually defeated the group of skeletons. Now if you didn't know, you could actually make it so you don't have to fight these enemies ever again. Simply walk out of the area and then walk back in. So when I loaded back into the marsh, the skeletons were no longer the issue. I now had to worry about the snakies. These guys do an insane amount of damage, so I really had to be careful. But after defeating the waves of snakies, I got distracted by this frog.
Wait, we need to see. Does he keep going? Hold on. He's gone behind the house. Will he appear on this side? Oh wait, he does! Yo, where does this frog go? You gonna jump over the dead body? Of course. Just no respect for the peasant, okay? The question that everyone wanted to find out, he's just forever stuck jumping here. Oh, good luck with your adventures, Mr. Frog. Does he actually stay there? Oh!
It's finally time. The part of Marsh that I was really dreading. Troll Mother Part 2. But not only are we fighting the Troll Mother and all of her trolls, but we also have 4 snakies to worry about. So for this fight, I decided to run from side to side. This would create a little bit of space, allowing me to shoot my arrows. Since I had Rami with me, he was able to knock the enemies as I moved, making it a little bit easier. But on this run, something very lucky happened. The Troll Mother actually got stuck behind these houses. This allowed me to focus on the snakies, since once they died, they didn't respawn. This was unlike the trolls, who were always going to respawn as long as the Troll Mother's alive. And after many arrows, I was able to defeat all of the snakies, allowing me to put all of my attention on the Troll Mother. And what felt like a lifetime, it finally happened. The Troll Mother died. So all that there was left to do was mow down the hordes of trolls. After defeating the final troll, we were back to snakies being the enemy, but this time we did get a little bit of help. I will kill every snaky for you. Next was the corn boss, which is the corn boss. Yeah, so there's not much to say about this fight, since it's mostly just a bullet sponge. Arrow sponge? It's a sponge, it's a spongy corn. Yeah, so this boss fight took about 7 minutes and wasn't too exciting. Moving on. After defeating the corn boss, we were gifted the horn. This is what allows us to open the door into Medusa's lair, which is home to more snakies. There are also the fishmen enemies who aren't really hard but definitely annoying, since after every 4 arrows they will jump and be immune. Although we did manage to somehow get one stuck.
What is this guy doing? Can he not like pass this line? Did someone draw an invisible line? Dude, how did this happen?
Next was Medusa, where we had the biggest jump scare of my life.
You can't, okay, so you can't block that attack. Jesus!
But jump scares aside, this Medusa fight was pretty easy. I simply just stayed close to Medusa, blocking with my shield when she attacked and shooting my arrows in between. So after defeating Medusa, I went and restocked my health potions at the best store in the game. Glop! Next is Full Moon, which is often referred to as the hardest non-boss level in the game, and with good reason too. So Full Moon has 3 stove face beefies. Each beefy comes with 2 regular stove faces, and just to top it all off, there's also a boulder you have to avoid. Now normally in Full Moon, this is the hard part, since we have ladder strat later on. But for this run, this was actually the easier part, since our arrows can only hit 1 enemy at a time, meaning ladder strat isn't as effective. But with enough patience, we should be able to get this done. I just need to make 0 stupid mistakes.
No!
Next is Snow World, which was a lot harder than I originally anticipated, since this level has Eskimo's melee in me as well as throwing snowballs. This meant I had to always be on the move to avoid the Eskimos, but at the same time, I had to also be wary of the stray snowballs, which is harder than it sounds. So I decided to get into a position where the snowballs cannot reach me. I then took out all of the Eskimos that were not behind an ice barrier, and once cleared, I was able to one by one defeat each Eskimo, making this a lot safer. So I simply repeated this for each wave, which led me on to the Frost King. Now, like the Corn Boss, the Frost King is an endurance fight. He's annoying to hit and does very little damage. That's why before this fight, I went and grabbed Bipolar Bear, who will kill the Frost King when he has 8% or lower health. This was so I could skip most of the Frost King's final phase, since it's really annoying. And speaking of annoying, let's see the Frost King's hitbox. Yeah, let me just save you the 15 minutes that this boss fight took. Next was the final 4 bosses of the game, but first, we've got to go through 12 cult minions that don't get knocked over or stunned by my arrows. Oh, and they do a lot of damage too. Yeah, so I have to fight these guys before every boss attempt, which could result in me having to use some of my healing potions, which I desperately need. So 15 minutes later, and we were at the painter boss fight, with 0 healing potions. But it's actually okay, since a range build is really effective in the painter boss fight. That's because the painter will only summon paintings, which can only do damage when they walk into you. Well, since I'm using a bow and arrow, I could simply just stay away from the paintings and destroy them from a distance. On top of that, I also brought Bipolar Bear with me, who further trivializes this fight. So I simply damaged the painter during DPS phases and destroyed his paintings in between. Now when the painter gets to about 40% health, he will enter phase 2. During this phase, the painter will stay down the entire time, infinitely summoning his paintings. Well, once again, Bipolar Bear makes this phase extremely easy, since all the paintings are one-shot. So whilst I focus all of my attention on the painter, Bipolar Bear is going around eating all that paint. Which, by the way, Bipolar Bear, you're okay, right? That's a lot of paint. Anyway, if you didn't know, the painter will drop healing potions on insane mode, which is exactly what I needed. So with the first of 4 bosses down, I was ready for the Undead Cyclops. So for this fight, there are 3 things that I have to watch out for: his casket swings, his fireballs, and the groom phase. Now both the casket swings and the fireballs can be blocked by my shield, although I didn't really need to, since they're also easy to avoid. Now for the groom phase, I'm actually able to PP ground strap myself, allowing me to wait out this entire phase. So if anything, the Undead Cyclops is definitely the easiest of the 4 boss fights, and is just a small hurdle before the real boss begins. It was now time for the Necromancer. So this fight is made up of 3 waves. The first wave being regular enemies. These consist of light, medium, and heavy juggles. This phase is hard, but definitely doable. The second phase, on the other hand, is a whole other story. So just like the first phase, we have a nice mix of light, medium, and heavy juggles. But this time, the Necromancer introduces 3 beefy enemies, with one of them just so happening to be the Brute. And somehow, if you can beat this second wave, you then have to fight the Necromancer himself. But going back to the beginning, why is this so hard? Well, you have to remember, I only have my bow and arrow for damage. And if we look through this entire challenge run, let's go over the hardest parts. Well, first of all, there's the enemy projectiles and magic. These would make it hard for me to do damage, since I was constantly getting knocked over. There's also enemy bombs, since they are hard to avoid and do a lot of damage. There's also been areas of the game where I've not had a lot of space, making it hard for me to get away from the enemies and shoot my bow. And finally, of course, any area with a large population of enemies, as I can only hit one enemy at a time, making it easy to get swarmed. Well, if we look at the Necromancer fight, all of these elements are part of it. Now I know what you're thinking, surely it cannot get worse from here. Yes it can. Since if we don't beat Necromancer before leaving the game, we have to redo the Painter and Undead Cyclops boss fight, and spoiler alert, we don't beat it in one session. And every time we failed, we had to fight the 12 cult minions again. I wish I was joking. So what was the problem? Well, to no one's surprise, it was the second phase. We seemed to consistently get through the first phase without much issue. At worst, a healing potion here and there. But the second phase is a whole other story. So straight away, we wanted to take out the alien, since they constantly shot projectiles. Getting hit by these projectiles knocked me over, potentially causing me to get swarmed and instantly dying. So alien was always our number one priority. But lucky for me, the alien is one of the enemies with the less amount of health, so he was normally easier to defeat. But after the alien, it was open season. My strategy at the time was running from side to side of the room, trying my best to create whatever space I could. This was honestly the only method I could do, but would often result in me either getting swarmed or picked up by a beefy, both resulting in death. I tried using Bipolar Bear to hopefully kill the enemies when they get weak. I used Rami to knock the enemies over and create space, Spiny for more defense, Snellbert for even more defense, Piggy to give me more healing from the fruit dropped, Meowbert for more damage with my arrows. Attempt after attempt after attempt I would get to second phase, only to be picked up by the brute and swift to kill. With each attempt, my hope was slowly fading. Was this truly impossible? Can you beat Castle Crashers using only the bow on insane mode? Maybe not. But then, I remembered. Who always carried me when times seemed rough? Who made the impossible possible? Rami. He got us through the Troll Mother. He got us through the marsh. If anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Rami. Oh my god! Oh, it's done! Rami, my friend, I truly apologise for anything I've said. You really are an S tier. But being serious now, it honestly was just down to luck. At least, that's what it felt like. I don't think I really did anything too different in my 5 hour of attempts. I think I just got really lucky. But with the second wave now defeated, we still had to fight the Necromancer, who doesn't get stunned or knocked over by my arrows, so he could be a problem. Oh, never mind, Rami's also knocking over the Necromancer. So with the help of Rami, I was able to keep knocking over the Necromancer, giving me valuable time to create some space and shoot some arrows. And after a lot of running back and forth, the Necromancer was finally defeated. This leaves us with the final boss of the game, the Evil Wizard. Now the Evil Wizard is made up of 6 phases, with 3 of them being in the air. If there's anything I've learned about the bow and arrow, is that it's not very good when shooting and jumping. So despite everything Rami's done for us, I decided to swap him out for Sherbet, who will slightly increase my jump height. This turned out to be essential, since without Sherbet, I couldn't really reach the height to hit the Evil Wizard. But for the first phase, we simply just had to destroy these 4 crystals, waiting for them to land and doing whatever damage we could. Rinse and repeat until all 4 crystals are broke, and we move on to the second phase. So for the next phase, the Evil Wizard will come down and have 2 different shields. The blue shield can only be damaged using magic, so for this phase, we have to wait and do nothing. But when the Evil Wizard gets a red shield, we can do damage with our arrows. But unfortunately, it's not that simple, since the evil wizard will constantly be moving around, and the only time he does stop is to do an attack which knocks us over. This made it infuriating to hit the wizard, since half of the time we were waiting doing nothing, and the other half we were getting knocked over. But 7 minutes later, we did beat the second phase and swiftly moved on to the third. Now, any of you Sherbet doubters out there, you're about to be proven wrong, since Sherbet is essential for these next 3 phases. So the evil wizard inflates and will begin to float in the air. Now his attacks here aren't that dangerous, since they do very little damage and only knock me over. But at the same time, my attacks are not dangerous either, since I can only shoot 1 arrow at a time. So for this phase, there is no way for me to shoot the evil wizard whilst on the ground, forcing me to jump and shoot only 1 arrow. As you can imagine, this severely lowered our DPS, making this phase take quite a long time. But things can only get better from here, right? So our next phase also sees the evil wizard floating in the air, and despite his giant size, he's actually a lot harder to hit than his previous form. Not only that, but the evil wizard will also hit us every time we go near him, making it even harder for us to do our damage. And just to top it all off, we also have to worry about 2 cult minions who will forever spawn. Now this is the only phase of the evil wizard boss fight that I was really worried about, since the cult minions can do a lot of damage. But with the help of Sherbet and a lot of patience, the evil wizard was defeated. There's another flying phase. Final phase time, and luckily the evil wizard decided to stay on the ground, although he does do a lot of attacks that see him go in the air, which I have plenty experience of. But this phase did go by a little faster, since I was able to damage him in the air and on the ground. Apart from that, this phase isn't too bad. He can only do 3 attacks, but mostly opts to do his meteor attack, which is very easy to avoid. So with a lot of patience and way too much arrow spam, the evil wizard was finally defeated.
C'est ton Freddy Fazbear. C'est ton Freddy Fazbear. C'est ton Freddy Fazbear. C'est ton Freddy Fazbear.